right, so welcome back to another episode of Dear Found Her. Today is the episode I have been waiting for since I started this podcast, since before I started this podcast. I asked for two things for my 40th birthday. I asked for a camp theme party with a live band and all my friends, and a camp best dress code, obviously. And I also asked for a Peloton. And given that I turned 40 at the end of 2019, I was really, really lucky that I got both. I started riding my bike when I could in between my work trips, and I found myself gravitating towards one instructor. Her playlists were killer, and anyone who knows me knows that music is my thing. She played all my faves: DMB, Bruce, Bon Jovi, Coldplay, Counting Crows, The Dead, the best of the best. But it wasn't just the music. She would talk about all of my favorite things: Jewish summer camp, live concerts, the art of a good mixtape, and of course, the importance of a good blowout. And anyone who's listening knows how important that is to me. Sometimes I could take the words right out of her mouth. And as I learned from researching for today, the similarities don't stop there. We're both communications majors. I desperately wanted to go to Syracuse, but my parents insisted that I went to University of Michigan. Oh, our birthdays are 7 days apart. And not to sound creepy, but Jenn Sherman spoke to me through that screen in a way that I honestly never thought possible. Before I knew it, I was, and I still am, drinking the Peloton Kool-Aid. My best friend once told me, I think that you and Jenn Sherman would really be good friends. And then one day my daughter came in, my 8-year-old, she was 7 at the time, and she overheard my ride. And she said, Mom, is that your friend? She sounds just like you. And after Jenn dropped an F-bomb, Lila said, yep, are you sure you're not friends? But it really wasn't until the pandemic, when we were locked up at home and I started writing vigorously, that Jenn Sherman and her message really started to resonate with me. Jenn is a storyteller. She shares her life. She connects with her audience, which is why they are not just an audience, they are her community. And as I look to make the biggest change in my life and my career in 2021, it was Jenn's constant message of JFDI, just fucking do it, that resonated in my head over and over again until one day I did. And here we are. So before I have you come on in and meet Jenn Sherman, I want to say thank you, Jenn Sherman, for pushing me in more ways than you will ever know to take control of my life and to live my life exactly the way I want to. You being here means everything to me today. Welcome to Dear Found Her.
I'm speechless. That is an incredible introduction. You have done your homework for sure, and I can already tell from this 60-second intro, from the first 60 seconds of it, that we are two girls from the same world. And it's so nice to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I mean, your story resonates with me in a way like none other. And the first time I heard you say it on the bike, that you emailed John Foley, and I got off the bike and was like, how do I work for Peloton? I mean, that was like what you inspired me to do. And that, of course, that is not my wheelhouse, right. But that was the inspiration that I received from you. And so I'd really like for you to share that story with our listeners, for those who don't know it.
Okay. So, I've told it many times before, and I'm as proud of this story today as I was, it's almost 10 years ago now, but it all started with an email. It all started with just hitting the send button and not really thinking much more of it, other than it was something I wanted to try to go after. So just to take you back a little bit, I had fallen in love with indoor cycling probably 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more. My father had passed away. I was always someone that needed exercise as my fuel, as my passion, my way to work out my mental stuff, the physical stuff, all of it. So I was always someone that was into taking care of myself, but I had never done anything professionally. I never played high school sports. People are always really shocked to hear that. I had never worked in the fitness industry pre-finding indoor cycling. But around the time of Peloton, I had already fallen in love with indoor cycling. It became my workout of choice. I was freaking obsessed. I mean, when I say obsessed, I was riding 6 to 7 days a week, sometimes more than once a day, not unlike so many of my members now, at a local little studio in New Jersey where I live. And I just dove in full force. And what connected me to indoor cycling off the bat was not just the endorphin high of being in a room with people together and that energy working off one another, but the music. Okay, you mentioned that you're a music girl. If you know anything about me, if anybody knows anything about me, it's my life. It's like number one. Like, it might even come before my kids. Like, I'm not even kidding around.
I get it.
So the music, I had a favorite instructor when I was just someone cycling in the room. And he became like a mentor. His name was Scott Holmes, and his playlists to me were everything. And so I fell in love with indoor cycling. It was just very generic how it started. One of my best friends, Barb Albert, I talk about her on Peloton all the time. I credit Barbie Doll, that's Barbie Doll on the Peloton leaderboard, with dragging me to my very first, what we called back then, spin class. She took me, and it wasn't for me like, it was very black and white. It wasn't like, oh, I kind of think I like this, maybe I'll go back in a week. I went back like the next day. I was instantly hooked. It was hard, it was challenging, but something about all of it just drew me in instantly. Let's just cut to the chase. A couple years later, I decided, I think I could be really good at this. I love people. I'm a storyteller. I love music. I love this workout. I could be really good at this. And I got certified. And I started teaching at a small studio in my town where I had been riding called MaxFit. A guy by the name of Chris Miller gave me my shot. He paid for me to get certified. He saw the passion in me as a rider in the class. I think he believed in me and thought I could be a good instructor. And that's how that part of the story, that's how my background in indoor cycling began. So it began in a really small way in my town, 5 minutes away. I was teaching a bunch of classes a week right here in town. I would drop the kids off at carpool and then be able to make it to where I needed to go teach my class. It was like a perfect fit for me at that point in my life. And then it just became something that really fueled me mentally, physically. I found it gave me purpose. My class became really, really popular. I was teaching, to sold out waitlisted classes here in New Jersey. I was working with Lululemon. Like, lots of cool things were happening to me at a time in my life where I didn't think I was looking for a second career. Like, literally, I was a stay-at-home mom because I wanted to be. And then when my kids were old enough and busy enough in school, I started getting that itch to do something. But never in my life, Lindsay, could I have ever dreamt that this indoor cycling career of mine, this little side gig that I had, would turn into the amazing Peloton hustle that it became. And that's probably at the point of the story where I would segue and say that, so I had already been teaching these indoor cycling classes in New Jersey, in the suburbs. No one knew who the hell I was, especially John Foley. And I had read, it started with an article, and I always say in all of my interviews, I think it might have been the first published article about a startup called Peloton. It was like a one-sheeter on a website called Well and Good. Are you familiar with Well and Good?
Yep.
Okay. So I must have been a subscriber to Well and Good, but somehow, and I don't even remember how, I went down a rabbit hole and I was reading a one-pager on a startup called Peloton. And at the bottom of this one-page, web page that I was reading, there was an email address. And it said, "Are you interested in joining our team?" And there was a very generic email address. I had no idea who I was emailing or where I was sending an email, but I saw that and I said to myself, what the hell? Like, send this email. The idea of Peloton, now remember, I hadn't spoken to anyone yet. This is just me reading a one-sheet page on a website about a bike that was going to be in your home, that was going to replicate the feeling of boutique cycling classes. Now, boutique Soul Cycle had just taken off. Those were buzzwords that were floating around everywhere, especially if you were into cycling. Cycling was hot, and I was loving what I was doing. I thought the idea that was presented on this website sounded genius. I did, but never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that it would turn into this. So I basically just wrote up an email. I had no idea I was hitting send, and it was going to be going on the receiving end to John Foley, who I adore and love, who I to this day will always say gave me this shot, and if it wasn't for him, I would not be here. That's a fact. It was our connection, our meeting, which we'll talk about, but that has me where I am today. But anyway, I sent this email saying, "This is why you need to hire me." That was the title in the RE line. And I put some information in there, a little bit about myself. I didn't hold back. I was very honest, of course, as I always am, about my age, knowing that I was sending off an email about wanting to possibly talk to the CEO of a company that was launching this incredible new fitness, platform. I knew that I wasn't probably the right age in my mind for someone that he would be looking for, but I let him know that I was a mother of 2 children, that I lived in the suburbs in New Jersey, that I was currently a very popular cycling instructor. I threw in a couple other embarrassing factoids in that email that I cringe when I read that email now, but we laugh about it, to this day. John still has it in his inbox. I still have it in my folder, of course. But that email, he says it struck a chord, and he answered me right away. I never even expected to get a response, Lindsay. It was one of those kinds of things. I sent it, put my heart into it, didn't know much about the concept except for what I had read, the broad strokes, and I heard back from him within a couple of days. And that email exchange led to an invitation by John to drive into the city. I remember, I always joke with him, he said to me, I know you live in New Jersey. I don't know how far outside of New York City you live, but would you be willing to take a drive into New York to meet me? He didn't know I live like 15 miles from the city. It's like my second home. I was still going there to get my hair cut. I was still going there sometimes to get all my facials.
Oh my God, you're me. I go to the city for everything.
Okay, so I was that girl. So I was laughing out loud when he asked me if I would mind taking the ride into the city to meet him. I met him for a cup of coffee back in 2013. I want to say it was the summer of 2013. That cup of coffee led to a second conversation, which led to an audition, which I talk about now and I think back to, and it's just incredible. I actually auditioned for Peloton in front of John and his wife and Hassao and the co-founders of the company. There were maybe 7 or 8, I always say this, when I went to meet John at that little office, that tiny startup office with 7 other employees, there were a bunch of geniuses writing code and like drinking beer and figuring it out and trying to raise money. Like, that is when I walked in the door. I am so proud when I tell my story that I was literally there from the beginning. When I say the beginning, really the beginning. And John made me an offer. This is now way before bikes are shipping and selling. This is before we've broken ground on a studio on 23rd Street. He hired me to come on initially to just build some content, to be the face of, Peloton in some way. It was in the early stages, but he invited me to join. I'll never forget, he said to me, "This is gonna move fast. Joining a startup is unlike anything else. I can't tell you how it's gonna go, but I can tell you as sure as shit that it's gonna be exciting, and are you ready? Because buckle up if you're ready to join." And I took a leap of faith. I walked away from opening up my own cycling studio. That's another little segue of the conversation. I was very close to opening up my own studio here in New Jersey. I had a partner, I had a location, I had funding, and I walked away from that opportunity, and I walked away from an opportunity at heading up a flywheel studio in New Jersey to join Peloton that I knew very little about. But that's
what was it in your gut that made you choose that opportunity?
As much as, again, as I'll say, I repeat myself when I say that there was no way to visualize what this would turn into. I did think that the concept and the idea sounded genius. There were so many moving parts that were going to have to come together for it to really take off. But meeting John for that first cup of coffee, first of all, our connection was instant. It's kind of like how I feel with you. even though John and I come from different backgrounds, different worlds, different parts of the country, we sat down and we hit it off immediately. I loved his energy. He was brilliant. He was passionate. He was thinking big. He was just, just being around him, his aura is what drew me in. I was willing to put these other opportunities on hold or walk away from them permanently because I believed so much in this concept from the first day. And when I say it was really like taking a leap of faith, it was, because at that point, it was in such the early stages, John couldn't even visualize a community or what that piece of Peloton would turn into. His vision was, let's bring these boutique, amazing fitness classes into a person's home and take away the stress of having to sign up for a class a week in advance and not being able to get in, and all the stuff that was going on in the big city of New York in the fitness world back then. He had just come up with a genius idea. There just were a lot of holes and pegs that had to fit into those holes. And for some crazy reason, I bought into every single ounce of it.
Well, but your intuition was correct. So,
incredible.
and I think there's so much that you just said, obviously, that we need to talk about. I mean, first of all, I always talk about the power of email and how you just have to send the email. And I've always thought that, and hearing you say your story over and over again, it takes me back to that. The power of the email is so important.
It is.
Connection. That your connection with John that is what sold you, just like your connection with your community is what sells us into Peloton and into you and into the whole process. I mean, he showed up as himself. He was totally honest. You show up as yourself unapologetically every single day.
And that, by the way, is the key. It's what I tell women all the time, because I do hear from women, as you can imagine, all the time. How did you make that shift? How did you make that change? How at 40 plus years old did you have the confidence? Guess what? I'm human like everybody else. I'm not always the most confident human being. That move that I made with Foley and sending that email, that might not have been something that I would have done 20 years ago, but I am so glad that I did. And I have lived my life from that moment forward very differently than I lived it before, because it is all about just taking that chance. What was the worst thing that would have happened?
Oh my God, Jenn.
Back?
Wait, Jenn, this is like my mom. No. Like literally, like in interviews, I am asked, like, how did you make the decision to leave your corporate job? And my litmus test is, what's the worst that can happen? And that's it.
By the way, and it's such a lesson for everyone to learn. It's a lesson to show my kids. I will constantly say to Carly and Evan, if you don't ask, you won't get an answer. There's nothing wrong with putting yourself out there and asking. Send that email to that professor, explain what happened, because guess what? You don't know how that person is going to receive your email. And it almost always, if it's presented the right way, you get a great result, or at least a good result. And at the very worst, like we just said, what happens? So you don't hear back from someone, but at least you put yourself out there and you tried.
One of the things that I think is really important to point out is, obviously you are the original Peloton instructor. You're the original face.
By the way, how cool is that?
I mean,
it's pretty freaking cool, because
but I'm so glad that you say that and you own it, because it is very cool. And you should say that, because look at where Peloton is, and you had a really key stake in getting it to where it is right now.
Well, thank you.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, let me just start off by just the comment that I just said. Again, 10 years in, there are plenty of people that have bikes that are in this community, that have whatever in our large Peloton community, who know that Jenn Sherman was the first instructor. But there are plenty that don't, especially people that bought product during the
pandemic
and so forth. So it does come up. I mean, I was just away on a vacation last week, and I meet members everywhere I go, and there was one group of members that came up to me who had no idea I was the first. They've just discovered me in the last year. And when I say it to them, I have such pride.
You should.
But the crazy thing is, it was all just timing and luck that it was me. but I don't give a shit. It's still so cool for me to be able to say that I was the first, and I wasn't the first by years. Let's be honest. I have to own up to that. Shortly thereafter, my amazing teammates like Robin and Jess King and Haley, and Hannah showed up. So I'm not there for 5 years before everybody else. It's only a short time, but it's amazing to reflect and look back on how we started. We were this small little microcosm. We were a passionate group of people who believed. There were 20 of us or less in those earliest days, and I'm proud of it. I definitely own up to I had a part of building this community, and I'm very proud of that. I couldn't be prouder, by the way, of my co-instructors, because that's like a whole other thing. I am obsessed, like stalker obsessed with my teammates. The way members are obsessed with us is how I feel about my team.
But that is amazing, and that speaks to the culture of the brand and the company and everything that you guys have
Lindsay,
built.
I can't believe what I'm watching go on with my teammates. I am like the proudest mom teammate. I can't even. That's a whole other conversation.
A whole separate podcast.
That's a whole other separate podcast. But anyway.
So obviously being the original instructor, you had an immediate following, and that following has continued to grow. And, admittedly, because I didn't get my bike till 2019 when I turned 40, I wasn't a part of your original like JSS tribe. But were you surprised by that? Like, and how did you take that, and how did you feel about that? I mean, all of a sudden, like, you had a community, whether you liked it or not.
Right. Well, there's so many facets to that whole thing. First of all, it started out slow, right? It was not an overnight, holy shit, I can't go to the grocery store because everyone's recognizing me. That took time to build and get there.
Wait, I do want to mention for people who don't know, because I've been told by like original Peloton members. So there is like a Facebook group for Jenn, which I don't even think I'm in, but there's a Facebook group for Jenn, and people like were clamoring to get in this Facebook group, and Jenn used to go in and talk to them in the Facebook group. I mean, because it was a much smaller thing than it is now.
Everything was much easier to scale back then, obviously. I mean, there was a time, Lindsay, and I'm proud of this too, but there was a time where you could come into the Peloton studio and ride with me, and I knew every single rider's first and last name. We have it on tape. I could call out my entire front row. That's the way I taught in New Jersey, in my small little MaxFit studio and at the JCC in Tenafly. For me, one of the joys of doing this was not just helping someone feel like they got a great workout, but it is the connection for me, okay? And so I did things the way that I did them coming out of that small studio, even when I got to Peloton, because it was like you used the word before, litmus test. Everything was so new. We kind of were creating our own way in the early days before there was a protocol and a format and all that kind of thing. So for me, even in the earliest days of Peloton, I was connecting almost to the point where it was taking up my entire day and night, because I was answering every DM. I was answering every Facebook message. When
did you realize, though, that you couldn't do that anymore? Because there comes a day that you can't.
I would say I spent the first probably 3 years at Peloton really letting all of that consume me to a point. And then it got to a point where it just wasn't sustainable. We all were getting too many messages in our inboxes, but I still tried. I mean, I was the instructor back on 23rd Street, and obviously so much has changed for so many different reasons, but I spent a lot of time with my riders after class. I didn't rush out the door. I took my pictures with all of them, and then I got a nice coffee and I sat in the lounge and I stayed. And that's pre-days of having, security be a thing, and Peloton becoming a massive household name, and a lot does change with that. But I just did things the only way that I knew how on every level, Lindsay, because I had a background in teaching an indoor cycling class and putting together a playlist. I had zero background in cameras, knowing how to speak or play to cameras. I had no background in dance or television or any of those areas of life that so many of my gifted co-instructors actually felt really comfortable on a stage per se. I was clueless. I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I literally had to learn how to become comfortable in front of a camera. And in those earliest days, you know, a lot of us had to learn our, you know, we had to sit.
But that's why everyone loves you so much, because you're like, it's not perfect. And
Yeah.
and you know what
Oh
I
my
mean? And
God, far from
obviously
it.
things are different now, and you've learned and you've grown, you
Yes.
know, and that's, you know, that's obvious,
Yeah.
but it is still very natural, and you have this natural connection, and that's why people clamor to you, especially people of like my generation and your generation. Like, and I'll say that, like, I love all the instructors. Trust me, I take other classes. I love you, but I do take other classes.
As you should, girl.
And, you know, but you're like my person, because I connect with you and in a lot of what you say. You know,
I think that came through early on. I got a lot of that from my earliest members, our OGs, as we call them. You know, they felt like they wanted to go to a concert with me or have a drink with me, or we knew people in common. It was still a small Peloton world at that point. And I kind of came into it. Of course, I had to be professional, but I think letting the world see that I was figuring it out. Again, I didn't have this professional background with television or TV or dance or any of that stuff. And so just owning it, that I was figuring it out and just being myself on camera, I did exactly the same thing in that small studio in New Jersey or at the JCC in Tenafly. I brought that expertise to Peloton, and then it just grew from there. Now, cueing and cameras and lighting, I mean, it's like I could do it in my sleep.
right.
But it was I had to walk the walk, and sort of, it all had to be learned for me. It was not comfortable. And I kind of just said, fuck it. I'm going to let them see that I'm not always comfortable. I don't always know what I'm doing here.
When did you realize that you were not only building a community, but you're building a personal brand? Because you of course are part of the Peloton brand. You're part of the Peloton team. But Jenn Sherman is a brand too. And you have a whole kind of separate thing with that. I mean, you have a great Instagram following, you have a great community, you're very active, you know, and that is inherent to you, not necessarily Peloton. You know, it's a part of it.
So that's one thing. I remember in the earliest days of Peloton, we would sit down and have these branding meetings, and there were instructors that were having a harder time trying to figure out who they were or who they should be on camera. That I can say unequivocally, I had no issue with that. Like, I was me. There was no way I was letting Peloton try to create a persona for me. That was not going to happen. I was 40, middle-aged Jenn Sherman, 40 plus years old, mother, housewife, wife, balancing career, children, marriage, the whole gig. And that was enough of a brand for me to help people of my age and my background. That's generally who is drawn to me. Every time I meet a 20-year-old who tells me they ride with me, I say, you're fucking lying. I don't believe you, you know, but I do have actually some young riders out there, which makes me happy. But I didn't have to create a brand. This was the brand. Very into pop culture, music, all things happening in the world. Talk a lot, very much like a talk show kind of vibe. That's kind of like the personality that I am. Like, when you sit down and we go for dinner, I don't shut up the entire time. I mean, we could have 3 more hours and we wouldn't be done. That's sort of what goes on in my class a little bit. And I think that what I've been told is that approachable nature is what made the community that was drawn to me right off the bat. They were drawn to me easily, and I welcomed them with open arms, almost to a fault, some would say, now that Peloton has gotten so big, because it's hard to go backwards, right? I have a lot of members who really got to hug and get to know and touch and feel and communicate with Jenn Sherman, and it's different now on a lot of levels. So I'm still that girl, though. You know, if I could still have the iced coffee in the lobby with my riders after class, I would do it. We just can't do that now.
Of course, things are different. But that's a testament to why you guys are so good at what you do and why you are so good at what you do. And but I want to ask you something, and this is a little more personal. And if you decide you want me to take it out, I will. I'm really asking for me, because I wanted to ask you this for a while. You know, you're in the public eye, and in the public eye, you have to deal with things that, you know, maybe are not so great all the time. And we have a lot in common. And one of the things we have in common is not something that I am proud or happy about. And I DM'd you about it. You probably don't know, but you did write me back, and I was really touched by it. You and I both lost friends the week of our birthdays. And to me, it happened when I was 20, turning 21. And to you, it happened last year. And when it happened to you, my heart fell into my stomach because I knew what you were going through. And I also was like, fuck, and she has to deal with this publicly.
Right.
And I wondered, like, you talk about not being polished and not being camera ready and like you learning all this stuff, and that is something too that like no one prepares you to deal with shit like that in the public eye.
No.
And you did it with such grace. And I don't know how you got on that bike and did that ride. I really don't. Because I know what you were feeling, and that this is a club I don't want anyone ever to be a part of. And, for the rest of your life, the week of your birthday, you're going to come back to it. I have
Right.
for 21 years.
Right.
So, how did you
Lindsay,
deal with that?
So for those who are listening that don't know what you're referring to, you're speaking of my dear friend Howard Godnick, who I didn't know a day before Peloton. I know Howard, and he became a special person in my life through this bike. That was a friendship that came directly from Peloton. And as I have spoken about him so many times, he was one of those OGs. He was my biggest cheerleader. I let him into my life because, again, I hear from people all the time. I have gotten to know people through this bike, but you can't let everybody in. And he is someone that I let in. And I'm so glad that I did. And it was really, really hard. It's really hard. And I've had tons of moments like that are not easy on the bike. It's not the one piece of Peloton that I've gotten used to, but I am still not comfortable with, is this public piece, honestly. Questions about my family life and my marriage, and when things happen, when I've taken some missteps at Peloton and said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing. I'm human, and I am not always prepared for the onslaught of what happens. You know what I mean? I still have an issue. Well, I should say I'm better at it now because of things that I've been through publicly. But for a really long time, I refused to believe that anyone gave a shit about me. I refused to refer to myself. Like when people would say, you have to be careful, you're in the public eye, I would like crack up. I would be like, that is ridiculous. When people would be like, you're kind of famous, I'd be like, that sounds moronic. To my own fault, because it's like I didn't let myself believe that. I still kind of don't believe it. I think I am so no big deal. Like I don't even I freak out when people freak out when they meet me because I still can't believe it, and I'm still not fully comfortable with it. It's both. That is the one part that I have not finessed. And a lot of my co-instructors are just much better at it than I am. I didn't come to Peloton to get famous. When John Foley said to me over that cup of coffee, "You're going to become famous," I was hysterically laughing at him. And he continued to say it in the early years when it still wasn't a big, Peloton was far from a household name. And I would tell him that he was fucking crazy. But he was right to some degree. And obviously there are instructors that have way bigger Instagram followers than me and way bigger just followings in general. I don't know how they do it because I have what I consider to be a smaller following in terms of social media.
You have a big connection, and that is
everyone keeps. That's what people keep saying to me. That's what the difference is, and
that
that's
is the difference.
It feels so much more intense at times, maybe. Listen, I let people in. You know what I mean? I let people in, and so I can't expect them. Like when I met people in Aspen last week, I can't expect them to not feel comfortable coming over to me because I am approachable. I've tried to be, right? So I can't have it both ways.
But here's the thing.
I want it both ways.
You talked about your family just now, and I know I don't think you've ever mentioned your husband's name. I'm fairly certain you haven't. And but you talk about Carly and Evan, and you do a really good job. And I think a lot of people can learn this lesson from you. And I talk about this a lot on my social media and a lot with my clients, that you have to know how to let people in by sharing some stuff, but also keep some stuff private. So you're not like, no one needs to know what you're eating for dinner every night. And you're really good.
100%.
You're very good though about maintaining a level of privacy while letting people in and letting people get to know Jenn Sherman without compromising your life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you noticing that. I've tried, and it's not because I know how to actually navigate the road. I've just tried to keep some things for my family and not have everything be out there. I mean, is it annoying when I'm in a restaurant and I can see someone taking a picture of my food? Yeah, that's freaking annoying. It's annoying. There's lots of little pieces of this, but for the most part, this Peloton journey has brought me so many blessings that I don't even feel comfortable complaining, because the complaints are tiny and small and they don't outweigh even close to the blessings that this gig has.
How do Carly and Evan feel about it?
Carly and Evan, okay, so.
And by the way, I loved Carly's like story in the car after the Dead show last week. That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other thing. Listen, they are actually very proud in their own way. Evan, I feel like, is more openly proud. He thinks it's so freaking cool, and he's a rider. He's a member. Like he uses the Peloton platform to keep healthy and fit. He takes my classes. He loves Alex Toussaint, as he should. So he's a Peloton fan, and he's super proud of me. Carly's super proud of me. She just has like a different way of showing it. Peloton.
Our kids are different, aren't they? They're all different.
Right. I mean, Carly is not sporting Peloton gear. Carly is not walking up to, someone in her sorority and letting them know who her mom is. They know, but she's not going to let them know. They're both super proud. It's freaking cool. I don't care what she says. She has a smile on her face when I get recognized all the time. She can pretend that it's annoying, but she doesn't mean it. You know what I mean?
It's funny that you say that, because by no means am I comparing myself to you.
Oh, I'm sure you're so well known
in Chicago. People recognize me, and one of my kids cannot stand it when people are like, "Is your mom Lindsay Pinchuk?" And my other kids take a picture of me and post it on your Instagram. Right. I mean, they're just very, very different. So
we have similar. That's what goes on in terms of Carly and Evan, but they both are super proud, and it's so meaningful to me to have been able to show my kids that I could do this.
Absolutely.
At 40 years old, I was like, you know what? Playing tennis and meeting my girlfriends for lunch just isn't fucking cutting it anymore. I want to do something. What am I good at? What do I love? Let me do this. Let me give it a shot. I never thought my following in little suburban New Jersey was huge for for a fitness instructor out here. You know what I mean? Peloton was just the big time. That was just hitting Broadway. Yeah. And I'm still in shock that I'm there. I'm still in shock that they'll have me.
But you know what though? That's what makes you you, and that's what draws people to you. I'm going to say that over and over. Yeah. I have a fun question for you now that I also have been wanting to ask you. I'm really going to a whole 180 here from my last dismal question. Sorry, but I really wanted to ask you that. You love Rob Lowe the way that I love John Bon Jovi.
Okay.
And I've seen John Bon Jovi 37 times in concert. I've gotten a kiss on my cheek.
It must disappoint you that I don't play Bon Jovi so much.
A little, but it's okay. But I know which rides have Bon Jovi, yes. And I search for it sometimes. But you are one of the only instructors that plays him. So, I got a kiss on my cheek from him at a concert recently, right before COVID. Have you met Rob Lowe?
No, I haven't.
I know he rides though, doesn't he?
He rides. I don't know how often he rides. He's been really kind and publicly has spoken about me in my classes. So that's how we sort of know that he even knows who Jenn Sherman is. I am destined to meet that man. It will happen. I have a sibling who lives out in California. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. I'm such a huge fan.
It will happen.
He's been a doll. I mean, he participated in his own way in that Rob Lowe ride, which I'm sure scared the shit out of him. I'm sure, you know what I mean? It had to have
It was the best ride, though.
It was
so great, that ride.
It was so fun. He really is. It was and still is my crush, for real. And that's a whole other thing. Just celebrities riding with, because I don't feel like a celebrity and I don't look at myself even this much that way. When I know there is a celebrity that does ride with me, that's just crazy town. That's crazy town. When someone rides with Robin Arzon, they're riding with Robin and she's the celebrity. When there's a celebrity riding with me,
No.
I'm like so bugged out over the top over it. So that's just
that just, I mean, shows everyone and tells everyone that's listening, like who you are, to be honest. And so, and that's important. I want to do a couple rapid fire, which I never do, but I want to do it with you. And then I'm going to ask you my final question. All right.
Okay, got it.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be scared.
No, they're just fun.
Okay.
It's just fun. Mixtape or sold out show?
Oh my goodness. How could you do that to me? I'm going to say mixtape.
Best live concert so far of 2022?
Coldplay for me, a month or two back, but it's still early in 2022.
I know.
So
I know. There is still a lot left of this concert season.
Still a lot of sheet left. There's a lot.
So what's next? What's your next live show?
I'm seeing I'm seeing Dead & Co on Friday at Citi Field. I saw them last week in Bethel Woods, but I'm going to see them at Citi Field, which is like just a different experience. So I've got that coming up on Friday. I've got a whole bunch of things on the horizon. I'm playing it by ear. I have to see how my summer goes, but I've got like a little list. I mean, I'm even thinking about, I was just talking yesterday about possibly Backstreet Boys, no joke. I think I'm going to see Styx with REO Speedwagon.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm throwing it back. There's a bunch of my favorite 80s artists that are touring this summer. I'm trying to get to as much as I can.
Yes, have to, especially after.
Springsteen US dates just went on sale yesterday.
Yeah, he's not coming to Chicago.
But he's coming back after the European leg. He won't miss that. But I noticed that.
I would hope not.
He's not going to miss that. But I was over the moon about finally having those dates to glance at.
So last TV show you binged?
Oh my gosh, I watch everything. What's the last thing I'm not embarrassed.
It's okay.
Kardashians.
It's okay.
Over the top. So deep. I'm so deep. I'm not ashamed. I think they're brilliant. I do binge a lot of stuff, but I hadn't been caught up on that. I kind of wanted to wait so I could watch it all at once.
All together.
I can't deal with 1 week at a time. That is so annoying to me. So that was one of the most recent ones that I enjoyed every minute of.
Favorite class you ever taught?
That's really hard. But I might say one that comes to mind right off the bat was a sing-along ride, an epic sing-along ride where the entire room was filled with JSS members and fans, and that was really special. I feel like it was during one of our homecoming weekends. If you were in that ride, you know which ride I'm talking about, but those are really special because that is audience participation like none other. And I'm a connector. I like to connect. And so all of us singing in one room together, nothing better.
Nothing better. I can't imagine.
It's really fun.
Favorite class you've ever taken?
That's an impossible one.
And if it's impossible, you can pass. I'll let you.
That's impossible. There's so many good ones. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
And last rapid fire, Indiana or Wisconsin?
You're going to do that to me?
People do it to me all the time.
Let's go. But I've got 3 more years to fall madly in love with Bloomington. It's a great place.
Oh, it's a great town. Both towns are amazing.
That's a really hard question.
I mean,
Madison's a really special place. It was really special for my son and for us as a family. And I'm sure I will not be able to answer that question by the time Carly is done her senior year. I'm loving Bloomington so far, but Madison's really special.
Well, and honestly, the weather alone in Bloomington compared to Madison, it's much easier to visit. I can say that.
True. You went to Michigan, right?
I did go to Michigan, so I'm partial to Ann Arbor.
Got it.
But
amazing place. I spent a lot of time there too.
So great there. So before I let you go and give you your day back, I usually ask a version of this question that I'm going to change up a little bit for you, just based on your background and where you came from. I would love for you to give some advice to any moms specifically who are at home or who want to make a change or just like aren't quite sure, because you are proof that it's never too late to start something. And I really try to hammer that message home always on my social media, through this podcast, through every piece of content that I put out. It is not too late. And I would love for you to share what your advice would be to those moms.
Listen, I know how those moms feel when you're at a certain stage of life and you kind of feel a little stuck, you've got kids running around the house or you're not happy with your career, it's scary to, think about change. Change is absolutely scary and frightening and uncomfortable. But you have to, at some point, let that noise kind of taper down and say, I know that I am worth seeing what can happen here. Just seeing what can happen here. It's not everything always works out. Plan A, plan B, steps 1, 2, 3 all in a row. But you've got to somehow find a way to believe in yourself first. I almost didn't send the email, I swear to God, because I didn't want John to know how old I was. I just knowing, being in the fitness industry and knowing what a young industry it was, I thought if there was a reason I wouldn't hear back from John, it was going to be because I was 40 something years old and I was a mother with small children. And I thought that was going to be the turnoff or the reason why I didn't hear back from John. You need to believe in yourself and you need to believe in other people. And like we talked about earlier in this podcast, unless you put one foot forward, you will never know. And what is the worst that can happen? What is the worst that can happen? You got to take chances and you got to take risks. At the very least, you'll stay where you were until you can figure out how to make that change. But you've got to get out of that mental space of I'm stuck and I don't know how to take the next. Baby steps, build. It could be an email. It could be a phone call. It could be a conversation. It could be looking to another woman who you admire and saying like, how did you do this? How did you find the strength of the power? It can be just something that sparks off of a conversation, but just, you got to keep your mind open. Closing down and shutting down is going to be the death of change and movement and, making your way to the place that you want to get to, that place that you're thinking about, that you're envisioning. You got to just take the step. Start small if that's what it takes, and then you build on those baby steps. No one should feel stuck. I know it's easier said than done, but everyone should try to go and live out. If it's not their biggest dream, maybe it's their smaller dream, start there. You got to just go for it.
Jenn Sherman, thank you so much for being here. I could talk to you all day. I know that without a doubt.
Same. Lindsay, and girly girls from the same
we world. Are cut from the same cloth. You have shared so many sentiments that I believe so wholeheartedly in today. And I am so appreciative of your time and of you, because you have changed my life. And that is really important for me to share with you while you are here. I can't wait to see where this continues to go, because you are just a continuous rising star. And I'm really excited to share this episode with our community. I will tell you this has been a career highlight for me. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, Lindsay, thank you so much for having me. You're a doll. I hope you'll come to the studio. I would love to meet you in person.
I would love to come to the studio, and I would love to have you back anytime you want.
Awesome. I will take you up on that. This was amazing.